Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest? Can I interview you? Or you? Or you? Or you? Or maybe you guys? How about you?
So to continue,
to fight the prince.
yeah. So John Matthias got a call from Jesus to go out. That Jesus is ready. He's got all his angels ready. Somehow, John thought he was the second coming of Gideon, right? Whatever, right? So he was going to go outside the walls of the city, right out there and destroy the heathen, right? Because these angel host was supposed to be right behind him. That's going to destroy all the heathens. But it turns out the angelic host isn't right behind him, and he just gets killed. And he has like 12 people with him representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Oh, because right now they are the new Israelites, right? The Jews are no longer the Israelites. These are the new Israelites, which is why Jesus can't go back to Jerusalem, right? Because it's no longer, the old Jerusalem with the Muslims in it. Jesus would never feel comfortable there. So there has to be a new Jerusalem, right? So he runs out, but with his 12 representative of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they all get killed, and they kill him and they cut off his head and they cut off his testicles and put it on a pike outside the city. And, everybody in Munster is up on the walls, and this is like, they're in there like a year now, right? They're going to be in the city for like almost 2 years. So they're up on the wall of the city and they see their prophet being mutilated, right? With no angelic hosts. And they all turn to the next guy in power, who's this Tom Cruise guy, right? John of Leiden. And they go, what's going on with our prophet? And he goes really quick, because he's really bright. He goes, you know what? He didn't follow the prophecy correctly. I was on the conference line, right? And Jesus specifically said, you go out there by yourself. You go out there, you ride out there by yourself, and the host will be right. All these angels will be right behind you. But as soon as he took the 12 representatives of the tribes of Israel, man, he unvalidated the whole prophecy, right? So he was not your true prophet. He was a false prophet. He was supposed to die. And they go, well, now he goes, well, no, I'm your new prophet, right? And that beautiful wife he has, well, she's going to marry me, and we continue, right?
Wow,
and then
that was like the ultimate alpha move in cult history.
Oh yeah, he's totally alpha, man. It's like, oh my God, it's quick, right? I mean, it's like, oh yeah, like that. He was a false prophet. I'm the real prophets, and I got the cell phone, right? And I was on the conference line, so I know he was wrong. And everybody's going, well, I guess so, man. Knickerbocker and all these other people are going, oh yeah, I guess, right? It's like, but what are you gonna do? You're already surrounded, right? And so this is the point where,
this is the point
the Prince
also
Bishop,
where I think that because the first guy, John Matthias, he gets chopped
Knickerbocker.
No, the guy that just
yeah. Matthias.
He was not a charlatan. He really believed the BS. And now it switches to
he had to, right?
Now it switches to John of Leiden. And now you have a charlatan.
Now you have a charlatan.
And there's no question about it. His cell phone to God, not real. Well, I mean, not that John Matthias' cell phone was real, but John Matthias thought his cell phone was real.
John
of Leiden,
right. It's so right. So by this time, right, the Prince Bishop had sent his doofus discount mercenaries twice to try to breach the wall, right? And twice they got beaten off by the Anabaptists throwing shit over the wall, right? Just a lot of times just stupid, like they tried to get these ladders to go over the wall and their ladders weren't friggin' long enough, right? I mean, this
you have to do math. The best part about
do some basic math, right?
The incompetence of the troops the first time, because they were drinking so much, they got mixed up between the setting sun and the sunrise, because they were so drunk they fell asleep, and the setting sun they thought for some reason was a sunrise, so they attacked the city at the
Yeah. So
at
after
dusk.
that, yeah, so the prince bishop says, forget it. This is all I can afford. So he went to all the cities around him and said, look, if you don't help me, this is going to happen in your city. So they sent like some real troops, and they still couldn't do it. And then so every time they lose, right, the prophets are going, see, I told you, man, well, we're defending off these the forces of evil because God's on our side. And the bishop goes, well, screw it, I'm not going to attack anymore. I'm going to build my own walls. And that's when he starts building his own walls around the city. So like
Right.
Caesar and Alesia, right? So now they can't get out. They can't send out their religious tracts to other Anabaptists, right? Because they kept sending out religious tracts, and actually they did get like an army of 1,000 other Anabaptists coming to relieve the siege, but they ended up getting killed. And then probably they realized that they no one was coming to help them, and there were no angelic hosts.
Right.
So they were basically screwed.
This is the part where we need Ali to talk about the walls.
So the outer walls are like ridiculous, 20 meters high, 8 meters thick.
I do want to set this up just for a second, because the city of Munster, before all this happened, was a strongly fortified city. It was awesome. And the walls, they had cannons on the walls. They were so well protected. So the king, the prince bishop had to, before the walls, the siege bunkers and stuff were outside of the cannon range of the walls. So there was this dead zone of about 3 football fields or so. So that comes in. Yeah. So it's important later, because that dead zone became an atrocious thing where people were literally eating grass.
Right after he built his own walls, right? Because basically, I mean, these mercenaries were sitting there for 2 years with nothing to do, right? So every night they were getting drunk. So every time John Matthias wanted to send out a religious tract to other Anabaptists, they just walked through this drunken army, right? And they were on their way. It was very porous, right? But when the Prince Bishop built his own walls, then they were in trouble. They couldn't get anything in or out of the city, right? And that's when John of Leiden goes, I just got off the phone with God, with Jesus, and he told me I'm supposed to. The whole problem, you guys, the reason we're having so much trouble is because we're not supposed to have communism. No, that was the false prophet. We're supposed to be. I'm the new David, right? I'm King David. I'm a king, right? You got to start treating me like a king. And as soon as you start treating me like a king, things are going to get better. That means all the wealth you guys put into this common bank to be divvied out to everybody as they need. No, that's all mine. That's all mine now, right? And he got a throne, and he got a crown, and he got retainers.
He phrased it like this. He's like, but it's not for me, because I'm dead.
That's right.
World. It's for the pleasure of God. That's why
glory of God. It's for the glory of Jesus, right?
And rings on every finger. And just real quick, we got to jump into the polygamy before we run out of time again, because that was a crazy thing. That was evil. But there were more women in the town than there were men, because like Joseph had said, a lot of the men left and left their women to guard their houses. So one of the things that John Leiden implemented pretty quick was the whole polygamy thing. And this is, I think, probably one of the reasons why this event is even remembered. Because like we said in the very beginning, there was so much crazy stuff going on. There was the Italian Wars with Charles V and capturing Francis, all that. No one would have even remembered or cared.
Henry VIII was going on.
Right. Yeah. But with the polygamy thing, you got to imagine just for a second, because the Anabaptists and all this, you can think of them later, with the Mennonites and the Amish and all that. These are super conservative people. And the whole idea of polygamy was shocking. must have been shocking for the people inside Munster, and later everybody else that heard about it. And that's probably one of the reasons why this is even remembered. So the wives, everybody had to have like 14 wives, and there was no age limit. It was just super creepy.
Right, and one of the backstories of John Leiden, of John of Leiden, is that when he was, Leiden is a city in Holland, right? It's actually the city the Pilgrims took off from to the New World. That's beside the point. When John was in Leiden, he was supposed to be a tailor, but he wasn't a very good tailor. He was a tailor apprentice, but he actually had a house of prostitution. That's how he made his money, right? So he was a whoremaster in Leiden, and he actually had a wife with 3 kids. But then when he became an Anabaptist and moved to Munster, right, it turns out that all the marriages, whatever happened before you were rebaptized, doesn't count, right? Because that's when you were a sinner, right? So his marriage and his poor kids living in Leiden still, right, they were like sin to be washed away. He got to start over, right? So he actually had married Knickerbocker's daughter, and then they found him in the bed with somebody else, one of the maids, right? And then he decided that he kept getting caught with women, right? I mean, he's handsome, he's charismatic, and he's a prophet. He has a cell phone to God, right? So everybody loves him. And then he finally figured, I'm not going to fight this anymore, right? God told me specifically, like David. And then he read in the Bible, like Solomon had 600 wives. David had multiple wives. You know, Isaac and Jacob and everybody had all these multiple wives. He goes, why? That's not fair. Why not me? And that's when he said, you know, I've been with these women. That's because they're all my wives, right? And he ended up getting like 14, 15 wives of different ages, including, you know, Matthias's main wife. He made her queen, and all the other minor wives were going on. And then he said, not only do I get wives, God said, be fruitful and multiply, right? He didn't say, right? So you're supposed to be reproducing. Yeah, you're supposed to, and also there's supposed to be like, I don't get this. I'm not good at apocalypse stuff, but there's supposed to be like 144,000 people who are saved, right? There's like 7,000 of these people. So he's thinking, wow, we got a lot of reproducing to do before we get our 144,000, right? So I'm not sure how he worked that out in his brain, right? Somehow he had to get 143,000, and he was going to do that within a couple months. I mean, he was lucky if he had 144,000 fetuses by the time Jesus came. But anyway, so a lot at that point, there was a rebellion within Munster.
I just want to chime in because the buffoonery, and that's the word that was used a lot by this guy Henry Gresbeck, that escaped from the city and helped the King Bishop, along with this little Hans of Longstreet guy, retake the city. But anyway, buffoonery, that was the word. Buffoonery kind of means amusing. And aside from the stuff that wasn't amusing, it was amusing. It was just crazy. They took being a heretic to a whole new level. All the crazy stuff they did. But you gotta give
that's what I was saying. Yeah,
of kudos in a way, because they manned that city. Their army that they threw together from the citizens outdid the Prince Bishop on a number of occasions. Now they did a lot of goofy stuff. One time there was a catapult that they didn't know how to build, and it went straight up and came back down on the catapult and stuff like that. The buffoonery was everywhere until they ran out of food.
There was also, so when he did implement the multiple wives, right, there was a rebellion within Munster, right, that people actually rose. They actually put him in jail, right? They put him in jail, and they put all of the 12 tribes of Israel in jail because they got new ones, and they put the Knickerbocker Doppler guy in jail. Everybody was in jail, right? And all they had to do at that point, right, was to open the gate and say, we give up, right? We got these guys in jail, right? And they had a meeting, right? They were trying to find his cell phone, right? They were trying to get the cell phone from John and ask God what was going on, but they didn't know the speed dial. And so they were going, well, maybe we should get the old, magistrates out of jail and let them take over, because we don't know what the hell we're doing. But at the end of the day, they didn't do anything. And somebody let John of Leiden out of jail. And he let everybody else out of jail. And he got his cell phone back. And all these people, it was like 600 people, right, who had rebelled against John of Leiden because of the bigamy thing. They were all tortured and killed. Right. So now anybody who had any doubt, right, are gone. Right. Anybody who was willing to rebel at all, anybody left in Munster were true believers, because if you didn't rebel with the bigamy thing, if you're giving up your 11-year-old daughter to be wife of a 60-year-old man, then you're all in, and it was getting a smaller and smaller group, right? But the true people, the true believers, were all that was left of this cult. And it was still, like you said, what, 7,000 people?
Yeah, so there was like
from the beginning, 30 or 40,000.
So when now he's King John Leiden, goes through all these reiterations, and he has this whole court, and he elevates people. So the maybe 800 that are elevated continue to eat. Everybody else,
right,
starving. And this is serious.
It's starving.
This is starting to get crazy, because people are seeing their kids getting thinner by the day, and then all of a sudden they start to notice, well, these other people that are dressed in the fancy robes and the special canes and whatnot, they're still looking good. And if I just want to jump ahead a little bit, because this is where it becomes atrocious. People were literally dropping dead on the street. And when the city was finally captured, which we'll get to in a minute, they found that the king and his people had enough provisions to last like another year. They let those people literally starve to death. So think about all the people that they killed, murdered, and then literally starved to death. And then at the end, they were letting people go. And by that time, it was too late. The prince bishop wouldn't let them through, and they were shot or starved in that dead zone. So all of a sudden, it goes from becoming buffoonery to not amusing at all.
Just being, a sick cult, right? And there was, so the final time, so it's been a year since John Matthias went out and died because of his prophecy, right? And John of Leiden gives another prophecy with, he got on the cell phone. He says, don't worry about it. I know it's a hard time, you guys, but look at, everything's going to be fine. I just got off the phone with Jesus, right? And he says on Easter, we're going to be relieved. The armies are going to come from God, and you're going to have food. It's all going to, all this hard work you did for the truth, right? Because what you're doing is you're fighting for the truth, right? This is the true, pure, unadulterated, word of God. This is the true gospel. Everything you suffered will be repaid 1,000-fold, right? As you become, part of this 144,000, even though there's only like 8,000 of them. Because I guess he's counting all the fetuses, right? Who's
what?
They're going to take over the world.
Of the 8,000 true believers at this time, most of them aren't believing shit. But there's nothing they can do.
They're not believing shit.
There's nothing.
So, but the thing he says, no,
on the freaking ground.
They're starving at this point. And John says, if I'm wrong about this prophecy on Easter about being relieved from the siege, and you guys becoming one of the 144,000, you should absolutely, burn me at the stake, because I'll be a false prophet, right? This is it. You got to believe. So, of course, Easter comes and they're still sieging, right? They're right, still starving. And he goes.
So John Leiden says, if it doesn't come true, you can cut off my head. He was buying himself time. Okay. So when Easter comes and there's no help, he's like, the whole thing with cults is the flexibility of the facts and the flexibility of the dates. None of that shit matters. So what did he say when Easter came and there was no help? How did he get out of it, Joseph? What was his backpedal?
he says, well, he said, okay, well, on Easter came, everybody's still starving. And he says, well, no, you misunderstood me, right? Oh, I get it. You guys thought you meant actually being relieved. No. What happened is that you've been spiritually relieved. Now you are the redeemed. This is a spiritual renewal that you feel urging through your starving body. And they're going, no, I still feel like I'm starving.
He
right?
says the stones on the street are going to turn into bread, and they were like gnawing on the stones. Freaking awful shit. Okay, jumping ahead to Henry Gresbeck, Little Hans of Longstreet. They give the Prince Bishop the information they need. The Prince Bishop mounts a attack. And this is where it continues to get weird. The soldiers, there's a couple ways to look at it. The soldiers were because at that time, the soldiers were paid on the booty that they got from the city. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Anyway, so a group of soldiers do get into the city, and for some reason, they don't immediately go and open the gate. In fact, they close the little gate where they came from. So now they're in the city with no backup, and they go around killing people and stuff a few times, but then they line up like they're gonna fight a pitched battle. And the Anabaptists give them a great run for their money, and it's weird, there's like battles in the street, but then there's a standoff, and John of Leiden is like, oh, hey, if you just lay down your weapons, we'll let you go free. And they're like, no, we can't do that. And finally they waited, they bought time until dawn, and they had a guy come up and wave the flag on the wall to tell the Prince Bishop to go over the walls, because the Anabaptists normally protecting the walls were in this standoff. Finally, they go over the walls, they open the gate, they kick the Anabaptist ass, they take the city, okay? The Prince Bishop has control of the city after 2 years. And there was just, devastation. He was lucky, though, that the Anabaptists didn't burn the whole place down and turn it really into a Waco, because that probably was the plan. They just didn't get it implemented, I think.
Right, yeah. Because the word got out to the people outside the siege that these people were like in the concentration camp. They were starving, right? But what they didn't realize that there is still 800 people, the king and his retainers, who are well fed, and they are in a corner, right? There's nowhere for them to go, right? They know they're trapped, right? So they have 800 willing people who are still healthy, who can fight, right? So when these 800 people sneak through, they got this secret openings, and they knew all the weak points of the wall, and they got into Munster. They thought they were going to be fighting skeletons, and all of a sudden 800 armed, women and men, but they're healthy and they're strong, and they have nothing to lose at this point. They can't back down. So all of a sudden these 800 come in because they think, well, we're in the wall, and it is, even though this is a nice Catholic country, believe it or not, right? If a Catholic army takes over a city, you get to get paid by rape, pillage, and murder, right? You get to rape, right? So they thought these 800 think they're going to come in and rape all these starving women, take all the gold, and be gone before all the other soldiers outside the wall know what's going on, right? But they did end up facing an actual army in Munster, and then they didn't do that well, and they ended up dying, and then they needed reinforcements from outside. But then when they did get into the wall, obviously the 800 left. Who knows, by that point maybe there was 400 left after their battle. There was no competition at that point. They were destroyed.
The Prince Bishop gave an order. He waited 3 days before he actually entered the city, but he gave an order. He's like, I need you guys to capture the Anabaptist leaders alive. Very important. So they almost got them all. They got Knickerdolling and John of Leiden and another unnamed Anabaptist leader. But the other guy, the prophet dude, Rothman, never found him. They say that he just walked up this
Yeah,
into heaven. But anyway, so the Prince Bishop
he got raptured. He was the only one to get raptured, right?
Right.
Everybody else just got burnt.
So the Prince Bishop has his Anabaptist, he's got his town, he's got his Anabaptist leaders, and he keeps them in prison and tortures them and debriefs them for a long time, months. And then on that fateful day, on January 20th, 1536, that contraption is built in the city square, which happens to be just right outside Knipperdalling's house.
Knickerbocker's
house.
Yeah.
The Prince Bishop is at the balcony looking over this. Now, there was about 200 or so spectators that came to watch. Prince Bishop didn't want any trouble, so he locked the gates of the city. And the torture contraption, as if you can kind of visualize this, it held 3 people simultaneously that were chained up there. And off to the side, they had a couple kettles where they had white hot charcoals, and they had, like a prong thing that they were going to use for the torture. And each person had to withstand his hour of torture. It legally had to be 1 hour. So they get up there and they read all the crimes against these guys. And it's like a prosecuting attorney just stacking on charges. It was everything from blah, 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 blah. And these guys must have been terrified, if you can think of how terrifying this would be, because all 3 people are tied to this contraption. And they go in turns, and they all got to do their 1 hour of torture. And interesting, they say that John of Leiden, King John, actually didn't cry out. And he stood there and he took it. And as his arms were held above him and they took the hot iron, and when it hits the skin, it just catches on fire. And slowly over an hour, they would go down. And by the end, his guts were hanging out. Still wasn't dead. After an hour, he was still alive, and they had to plunge a dagger through his heart. By this time, Knickerdalling.
Yeah. And so, they also were taking prongs and like pulling flesh out of what, not just burning him, they were actually pulling flesh away, like little pieces of meat. And the last thing they did before they stabbed him was to take out his tongue. Right. I mean, they wanted him to scream, right? They wanted the other 2 to hear him scream, which I don't know if he ever did, but they finally took out his tongue. So and you're right. If he passed out, they stopped the clock, like in basketball or football, right? Not like, baseball, where you just goes on as long as you want. It was, if he fell asleep or, became unconscious for 15 minutes, they stopped the clock, woke him up, started the clock again. So he had to be conscious for 15 minutes. And this wasn't the only 3 people who went through this shit. I mean, remember that one time in Pulp Fiction, when I think John Travolta says, "I'm going to get all medieval on you." I mean, this is what he meant, right? These people are medieval. This is what they do to people.
Right. It's not
if
that
you don't believe like they believe. Torture was not that unheard of.
Right. Which is saying
this was the time in
it wasn't uncommon. It wasn't uncommon. That's why, spectators came. We say they enjoyed the show. So yeah, it wasn't uncommon, but it's crazy brutal to us to think about the state doing that to somebody. And right by the platform where they were doing this, they had those 3 cages. And after they were finally tortured to death, they put each one in their own cage, and they hung it from the church of St. Lambert's Church. And you said that they moved them. It's not there, it's somewhere else, but they're still in the city of Munster. And
they're still on the church. They're still on the church. Yeah, the 3 cages are on the church. Yeah, because that was the church they took over, right? They took out all the idols and the relics and the bones, and they destroyed the other churches. But like Lambert was the church for the Anabaptists, so that's the one where the bones got. And the bones were there for like maybe hundreds of years. The bones are gone now, but you can go still see the cages, right? I think they should like, sell tickets where you can like ride in the cages up and down the church, to get a feeling of what it's like to be a heretic. But you can go. I mean, I think we should do there. We should make a trip to Munster just to get a picture of us inside the cages.
That'd be great. And the implements that they used, the whatever they were called, they hung those in a prominent place too, where everybody.
Yeah. Hopefully they finally took off the testicles of John Mathis from the city wall. That's kind of just, that was probably eaten by crows by then. That was like a year later. But finally, at the end, the Prince Bishop tore down all the walls. He tore down his walls and he tore down the other two walls. He says, no more walls. Nobody gets a wall. No walls for anybody, right? We're not going to go through this again, right? Because, I mean, if the walls wasn't there, there would have never been a problem. They could have never had, because it wasn't like the Munsterians or the Anabaptists were like great warriors. They just had great walls, right? And, they were...
These characters, they were so colorful. The months that they spent in prison being tortured, a lot of weird stuff happened. So I think it was Nipperdalling. Because the Prince Bishop one time was like, you know how much money you guys cost me? Like that's his.
No, that was John of Leiden. That was John of Leiden.
And John Leiden says,
we make a deal till the end.
He's like, yeah, trying to make a deal. He's like, look, I can make your money back for you and more. All you got to do is put me in a wagon, like in a cage, take me all around Europe. And, like Anabaptists in a cage, and people will pay money. And then the Prince Bishop is like, no, not going to do that.
Right. And the other one, he says, okay, you got me. Cell phones are fake. And I'm going to go to all the other Anabaptists in all the other cities, and I'm going to tell them the cell phones are fake. You guys better become Catholics. Just let me go, right? Let me go, and I can help you out, right? And the Prince Bishop goes, no, you're not going. You're not talking yourself out of this. You're not going to go talk to other Anabaptists. Because the other Anabaptists, I mean, all of the violent Anabaptists were gone by then, right? And Anabaptists like the original one, Mouthon or whatever, it's not Hoffman Malthor was the original one. He was very peaceful, and they put him in jail. And then all the other Anabaptists became, so they couldn't stay in Europe, right? The Anabaptists couldn't stay in Europe. Everybody's pissed at them. I mean, what's funny is like the Catholics and the Lutherans like hate each other. They totally hate each other, right? And this is before the 30-year war, where actually 50% of the population of Europe is destroyed in religious wars, and during the 30 Years' War in the 1600s, right? But at this point, they're too busy hating on the Anabaptists. So all the Anabaptists have to leave, right? So they all pack up and they move to the New World, and they become the Mennonites and the, what's the other one? The Mennonites and the
Amish.
Help me out. The Amish. So they become that. So these are probably the most peaceful, non-violent people in the world, right? They're not going to hurt anybody. The most they're going to do is shun you, right? And there's nothing I like better than being shunned by a Mennonite, right? It's like, oh, please, shun me.
They're very competent business people. The Mennonites and the Amish have, a multi-million-dollar business in building sheds, and they send these sheds out all over. That's like these pre-manufactured. They are great at woodworking and lumber construction, stuff like that. People buy Mennonite shit all the time. Anyway, so they're great. And are we going to keep going with the fifth? You got to remember, there's was so much shit going on right now in Europe that this stuff was barely a blip on a radar of any of the real rulers. Yeah. It was crazy. Like I said, it would probably not even be remembered if it wasn't just so weird.
Right.
Especially
but how could people get sucked into that? But how could people get sucked into like Waco or the QAnon or what is the guy that late great Planet Earth or the Left Behind series, or there's one guy said 88 Reasons for 88. I mean, or which is the one guy who said Jesus was going to come back.
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
Name,
like I said in the beginning.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. It's like, and people
more,
continue to believe it, right?
Right, and it's not funny in a way, because more children, like I said, are growing up in cults now than ever before, and there's every freaking little rural area in America has their own little weird cult thing going on, and some of them are just not really interesting. Some of them, they dig holes and they're waiting for the end of times and they're dying in holes. So it's awful, and it's just part of human nature that we can't. We have to be part of a group. It's so weird. I don't know. It's so weird.
Everybody. I mean, that was the problem, and that I mean, I'm not a Catholic. A Catholics have a lot of bad things going on, but they knew, like, once you translated the Bible, man, it was just going to let open this whole Pandora box full of craziness, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, the problem is, once you buy into the end of times, right? There's no reason to take care of any shit on Earth, right? All the real problems we have, with global warming or, or economy or poverty or, human rights, so it doesn't make any difference, because Jesus is coming back, right?
Right.
You don't have, even if you try to take care of that shit, right, you become part of the Antichrist, because you're not buying into the end of the world, right? He says, like, whoa, we got to take care of stuff here, right? You got to stop believing in the Easter bunny and stop arguing if it's real eggs or chocolate eggs. It's the Easter bunny. It doesn't exist. Santa, I mean, there's a lot of good people in the world. There's a lot of good people in the world who believe in Santa Claus, right? But they're all like 10 years old, right? At some point, the human race is going to have to grow up, right? And if we're going to survive on this planet, we're going to have to give up on a lot of the superstitions and face the fact that we have real problems that Jesus is not going to solve. And maybe that's what Jesus would actually want us to do.
And I think that'll probably...
Who do I don't know. We're goofy. We're goofy. I have no idea.
I know. I agree with you. And I think that will probably happen if we do manage to survive. The reason I think it'll happen is because cults don't attract the best minds. They don't attract the best founders. There's no exit strategy for the founders of a cult. They're not going to be able to cash out.
And that is all the time we have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Goofy Historians. You can go on our website, goofyhistorians.com, to buy merch and to look at the show notes for this video. And make sure to be on the lookout for our next video coming later this month on the Canterbury Tales featuring David Pike.
Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest? Does history repeat itself? Not really. But sometimes it kind of rhymes.